Welcome back. You're watching NewsX. My name is Vineet. There are as many as 7 multi-party delegations that will be articulating India's stance against terrorism across 33 countries. Kanni Modi Karunanidhi-led delegation will be arriving in Russia on the 22nd of May to establish India's unified stance and zero-tolerance policy towards terrorism. The delegation includes Mr. Rajiv Rai, Mr. Mia Altaf Ahmed, Captain Brijesh Chota, Dr. Ashok Kumar Mittal, Premchand Gupta, Ambassador Javed Ashraf and Ambassador Manjeev Puri. Well, you may be wondering what the Indian delegation will be presenting in Russia. It includes a customed dossier prepared by Indian intelligence and foreign policy expert, which aims to expose Pakistan's decade-long support and promotion of terror. This dossier will delve into the details of direct links between Pakistani state institutions and terror outfits like LET, JEM and the Haqqani network and much more. India has made it abundantly clear that Operation Sindoor is our fight against terrorism. Through India's biggest diplomatic outreach, India wishes to expose the terror hub that Pakistan has become. Let's not forget that over 100 terrorists were neutralized during Operation Sindoor. So, what may be the outcomes of these dialogues in Russia is the big question that we will be delving into today with our guest. Joining us on the show is Dr. Sergei Dvoryanov, President of IDC Russia and Director of the WHD International Board. He's joining us all the way from Moscow. Also with us is Mr. Ladislav Zamenek, Research Fellow at the China Sea Institute. He's joining us all the way from Budapest. Mr. Ruben F. Johnson, Director of the Asia Research Center at the Fundka IM. He joins us all the way from Manila, Philippines. All right, let's cut across to Sergei, who's joining us as well on the program. Sergei, if you can hear me.
I think you have a different guest. I'm Dmitry Symes from Sputnik.
I beg your pardon, Dmitry. Dmitry, thank you for joining us. You're all the way in Russia. You're in Moscow. It's always been very evident that India and Russia have not only been friends, they've been, lifelong partners since the beginning of India's independence in 1947, since the Cold War. In fact, India got ostracized and relegated by the Americans because we decided to support Russia when the Cold War took place. But the fact of the matter is that we live in a very different world today. It's a multipolar world where affinity and friendship is completely dependent on the trade that is done between these two countries. That is at least what Donald Trump has initiated. But the fact of the matter is that Russia acknowledges that India has a terror problem, and that terror problem has been orchestrated in Pakistan. And it's not only in India, Dmitry, they have done it all across the world. What is your, eagle's eye view of what's happened in the last few days and India's diplomatic outreach in Russia?
Well, I think the very first thing is that we're very grateful that India is sending this delegation to Russia and that they plan on giving us firsthand information about the operation itself, the root causes of the operation. I think it's really good to maintain this sort of level of in-depth dialogue when it comes to the problem of terrorism, because both Russia and India suffer from terrorism. And both Russia and India have an interest in the stability of Southern Asia, Central Asia, because I want to remind your viewers that just last year, Russia suffered from one of the most devastating terrorist attacks in its history during the Moscow concert hall attack. And in that conglomeration, you had an interesting sort of dynamic where on the one hand, the direct organizer of this attack was ISIS Khorasan, based in Afghanistan. But the attack was in many ways ordered and paid for and, ultimately planned by the Ukrainian secret services. So we understand that a lot of these terrorist organizations in Southern Asia pose not just a regional threat, but a potentially global threat. And I want to, note that LET, which you mentioned, is a group that is forbidden in Russia, quite for this reason. So we're very aware, we're very attentive to the problem of terrorism, and we want to work together with India, which has some of the best intelligence agencies in the world, to make sure that scourge of terrorism doesn't spread any further.
Absolutely right. Dimitri, stay with us. Let me also, in fact, bring in Mr. Ruben F. Johnson, who's with us on the broadcast. Mr. Johnson, India has, started this initiative because the world wants proof. We were on the brink of a major war which could have gone nuclear. Both the countries are equipped with nuclear armaments, and the fact of the matter is that India is a responsible nation, and in that same quest for responsibility, we decided this outreach towards the world. Do you think that this is going to become the new normal whenever and wherever terrorism is involved?
When you say the new normal, how would you, what would you mean by that, sir? I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with the question.
Well, the new normal of, letting the world know of what India stands for, what India doesn't stand for, and what proof did we have to attack Pakistan?
Okay, well, first of all, if you're talking about Pakistan being a supporter of terrorism, there's many countries that would agree with you. But if you're talking about what India stands for, India is a country which, like its other partners in the BRICS, particularly Brazil, has always known for being a nation which had great support for or was a great advocate of anti-imperialism and democratic values. And yet you are embracing Russia, which is about the most imperialist and anti-democratic nation that there is on this planet. That's number one. Number two, I don't understand why you're going to Russia when Russia's number one partner in the world, its number one partner in the war with Ukraine is China, and China is the number one backer of Pakistan. As a matter of fact, there's all kinds of news coming out in the last couple of days that most of this operation, which took place in Kashmir between the Indian and Pakistani armed forces, would not have been possible without China, and that China had very deep involvement. So there's all kinds of ends here that I can't make meet. I'm sorry, sir. I don't understand the logic behind any of this.
All right, Dimitri, do you think that the United Nations also has lost a lot of credibility in terms of containing and controlling the narrative around terrorism as well? Because India has been pleading to the United Nations for decades now. It's not a permanent member. Russia is, so is China, and they have thwarted each and every action of ours when it comes to naming and shaming terrorists and terrorist supporters in the United Nations. Do you think that is also a problem that is not only India's but the world's as well?
Well, let me quickly respond first to your guest's assertions, because I think it's important to set the record straight. For starters, he says that Russia is the most imperialist, anti-democratic country in the world. I was born and raised in the United States, and so I have some reference for comparing these two countries. And I can say quite confidently that Russia, again, Russia is not the country that has the largest military budget in the world. Russia is not the country that has military bases all around the world. Russia is not the country that's orchestrating color revolutions and proxy wars all across the world. All of Russia's military conflicts were places, in close proximity to Russia, and when Russia's national security was directly at threat. And, even if we look at Ukraine, it's absolutely ludicrous to say that Russia's behaving in an imperialist fashion, because Russia doesn't even want to conquer all of Ukraine. If it wanted to conquer all of Ukraine, Ukraine would have been conquered a long time ago. Russia, from the very beginning, tried every possible diplomatic outlet to find some sort of de-escalation back in 2014, back in 2022. But thanks to the Ukrainian regime and its Western backers, we are where we are. Now, moving on to the point about, Russia being somehow uniquely aligned with China. I want to note that, again, Russia's foreign policy is multipolar. So we have good relations with China because China is our neighbor. China is interested in doing trade with Russia. But we also have a very good relationship with India. And if you look at the trade numbers, trade has exploded between Russia and India. Russia is making a full-scale pivot to Asia, and that's not limited to China. It involves countries like Malaysia, Vietnam, so on and so forth. And so the claim that this sort of is, some sort of unique Chinese-Russian alliance is just removed from reality. Regarding your question about the United Nations, I think that Russia has repeatedly pointed out that the United Nations has a sort of Eurocentric, Western-centric problem because the Security Council was formed in 1945, and obviously the world has changed significantly since then. And so it doesn't make much sense, for example, for the African Union to not have representation. It doesn't make sense for countries like India not to have representation. And so it's quite clear the United Nations is in need of structural reform so that countries like India and other countries in the global south have a fair voice.
Fair enough. Mr. Johnson, do you concur with the fact that the United Nations also needs to evolve? It was formed a long time ago, and the realities of today's world and today's geopolitics are quite different from what it started out?
United Nations was formed a long time ago. It had one function, that was to prevent World War III from happening. And through various means, and sometimes not in the most efficient or pretty way possible, it has fulfilled that mission. But now that we're in a different world, its current structure is somewhat outmoded and archaic and doesn't really work in the present day anymore. There are lots of proposals, there are lots of ways the UN can be reformed, but the question is the nature of that reform, and I'm sure that's something that most of the member states, because 2/3 of the UN member states are dictatorships, they probably would not agree with the other 1/3.
Okay, Patrick Lancaster, war reporter, is also joining us from Rostov in Russia at this point in time. Patrick, appreciate you taking out that time and speaking with us. Though we are talking about India and India's global outreach to inform and educate the world about a problem related to terrorism, it is also important to realize that this is not only India's problem, and India is in fact beginning to assess and disseminate this dossier, this problem to the world, because sooner than later it will affect everyone. It's affected Russia, it's affected America, it continues to affect us more because we border the terrorist backing state called Pakistan.
Hello. Just a little correction. I'm not actually in Russia, Rostov. I'm in New Delhi, India. I came here to kind of see for myself what the situation is and talk to the people about how they feel about the current tensions between India and Pakistan.
India and Pakistan. It did get nuclear at one point in time. And of course, there was a lot of worry and concern, and it resulted in a ceasefire. Do you think it should, serve as an eye-opener for the world? Because the Western media completely went quiet about it as soon as the ceasefire kicked in. Patrick, that's for you.
Well, of course, it needs to be looked at by the international community. One of the major things that I noticed here in New Delhi in the last week that I've been here talking to the people on the ground here is the fact that they expect more soon. And they were so angry at this terrorist attack that took place in April, of course, that the overwhelming, both by the people and the military, as far as I can tell, is that this ceasefire is not really a ceasefire, but it's described as a pause. So we'll see how things play out in the near future. But hopefully the international community does take more interest in what's going on here.
Dimitri, the same question to you. The conflict between India and Pakistan did get to a point where murmurs and whispers about nuclear conflict did start to erupt, and that is a concern. There is an ongoing war between Israel and Hamas at this point in time. The Western media is covering it syllable by syllable, and there's no nuclear factor involved over there. But when it comes to India and Pakistan, do you think that the Western media is a little myopic?
I mean, I would definitely say so, because I think that despite the fact that India is one of the world's largest economies. Despite the fact that India has one of the most powerful militaries in the world, people in media circles still don't fully understand the importance of India. Whereas they've been used to covering conflicts in the Middle East, so they do things that, it's a habit for them. India and, the Indian subcontinent as a whole is something that really still remains on the periphery of imagination. There are not a lot of specialists about India in Western countries. And to be quite honest, Russia would be better off having more India specialists as well. So, I think that one of the ways that this sort of intellectual iron curtain can be overcome is simply by the sort of conversations we're having right now. It's important for people from Western media, from Russian media, to get together with people from Indian media and get their perspective on what's happening. That's certainly something that we've been trying to do at Sputnik. And, I think that at least helped somewhat in the Russian segment get a better understanding of India's perspective. But it's clear that there's a long road to be had before people really understand what's going on between India and Pakistan.
Dimitri, what do you make of the changing landscape throughout the world, which was kicked in by Donald Trump, especially when he announced those tariffs? Do you think that has sent a number of countries into a huddle, and the fact that China is feeling cornered, could change a lot of geopolitical balances throughout?
Well, I would say that it began before Donald Trump. A good friend of mine, Brazilian journalist Pepe Escobar, calls this decade the raging 20s, because first you had COVID, then you had global supply chain shock, then you had Russia, Ukraine, then you had wars in the Middle East, and now you have this, tense showdown between India and Pakistan. You have global trade wars. And so we're living through a very volatile period when the old US-based international order is starting to crumble and a new order is starting to emerge. And overall, I'm quite pessimistic about the United States' ability to stay on top. Again, this is not simply because of political reasons. I don't think it's a secret for anyone that the US political system is dysfunctional. But when we look at the indicators of hard power, military, economics, scientific innovation, on all these three indicators, the United States is losing ground. And in order for it to regain this ground and to maintain its primacy, it would have to do really bold and competent reforms. To be quite honest, again, as someone who's born and raised in Washington, D.C., who knows the American political system well and knows some of the players currently involved in Washington right now, I don't think that's not a very high possibility.
Appreciate your candor, appreciate the way you've been able to in fact explain to our viewers as to what the situation is globally as well as in context to India. Would like to thank my other guests as well for being a part of this conversation. We're going to take a short break now. We'll be right back.